They found me at a gas station, stranded and alone in the desert heat. They thought I was a victim. They were about to discover I was the hunter. The heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves, making the lonely stretch of Nevada highway look like a river of black glass. My beat-up '98 Camry was running on fumes and prayers, and the single gas station ahead was less of an oasis and more of a grimy question mark. Still, it was the only option for 100 miles. I pulled in, the gravel crunching under my tires, and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the buzz of a fly against the convenience store window and the distant caw of a crow. I was tired, bone tired. The last 3 weeks had been a blur of stakeouts, lukewarm coffee, and the kind of scum that makes you question humanity. All I wanted was a full tank of gas, a bag of stale pretzels, and another 5 hours of road between me and this God-forsaken desert. I was unscrewing my gas cap when I heard it. The low, guttural rumble of multiple motorcycles, growing louder until it vibrated in my chest. 4 of them pulled in, chrome glinting under the oppressive sun. They were the stereotypical biker archetype, straight out of Central Casting. Leather vests adorned with menacing patches, greasy hair, and faces that looked like they'd been carved from rock and soaked in cheap whiskey. They parked their bikes in a haphazard way that blocked me in, a clear and deliberate power move. I kept my head down, focusing on the nozzle, hoping to be nothing more than a piece of scenery. No such luck. The leader, a mountain of a man with a beard braided into 2 greasy ropes, swaggered over. He smelled of stale beer and unwashed denim. "Well, well, what have we here?" he drawled, his voice a gravelly rumble. His 3 cronies fanned out behind him, their smirks identical. I didn't look up. Just getting gas. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Rule number 1 when dealing with posturing aggressors: don't give them anything to feed on. Be a gray rock. "In a hurry, little lady?" he chuckled, planting himself between me and the pump. I could see his cracked leather boots in my peripheral vision. We were about to use this pump. It's kinda our pump. I slowly raised my head, meeting his gaze. His eyes were small and piggy, swimming in a face reddened by the sun and probably high blood pressure. "My mistake," I said, keeping my tone even. I started to put the nozzle back. "It's all yours." De-escalate, analyze, escape. The mantra from my training whispered in the back of my mind, but he wasn't interested in de-escalation. He was interested in a show. He put a beefy hand on the pump, stopping me. "Not so fast. We don't see many of your kind out this way. You lost?" My kind. The words hung in the dry air, thick and ugly. I could feel the eyes of his friends on me, sizing me up, dismissing me. My hand tightened on the cold metal of the nozzle. Threat assessment. 4 hostiles, likely armed with knives, possibly 1 firearm, but probably not. Overconfident. Impulsive. This was about dominance, not robbery. "I'm just passing through," I said, my voice dropping a little, a hint of ice creeping in around the edges. "If you'll just let me finish, I'll be on my way and out of your hair." The leader, Grizz, as the patch on his vest read, laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "I think you'll leave when we say you can leave." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. The stench was almost overwhelming. One of his buddies, a scrawny guy with a twitchy eye, snickered and stepped up beside him. "Yeah, Grizz, maybe she wants to hang out with us for a while," Twitchy said, his eyes raking over me. I made a decision. Fuel wasn't worth it. I let go of the nozzle and turned to go back to my car. "Have a nice day, gentlemen." That's when Twitchy made his mistake. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "We ain't done talking to you." Everything stopped. The buzzing of the fly, the cawing of the crow, the shimmering of the heat. All of it faded into a dull background hum. All I could feel was the pressure of his fingers, the greasy texture of his skin against mine. My brain, the part that had been running on fumes just moments before, snapped into crystal clear focus. I catalogued everything in a split second. Twitchy's grip, firm but unbalanced. Grizz's position, too close, his gut leaving him wide open. The other 2, 3 and 5 feet back, respectively, both smirking, not expecting a thing. The distance to the tire iron in my trunk, 14 feet. Too far. The full can of pepper spray in my purse on the passenger seat, 9 feet. Closer, but still not ideal. I looked down at the hand on my arm, then back up at Twitchy's face. I let the weary traveler persona melt away, let him see the cold, hard calculus in my eyes. I gave him one last chance, a professional courtesy. Let go of my arm. I said each word slowly, distinctly, like pieces of ice dropping into a glass. He just grinned, his yellow teeth on full display. "Or what?" he sneered, tightening his grip. I didn't answer with words. I rotated my body a quarter turn, using his own grip for leverage. I dropped my weight, placed my free hand on his wrist for control, and pivoted sharply on the ball of my left foot. It was a simple Aikido move, one I could do in my sleep. It wasn't about strength, it was about physics. His arm was locked straight, and as I pivoted, his wrist bent back at an angle it was never designed to go. There was a sickening, wet snap that cut through the desert air, loud as a gunshot. Twitchy let out a high-pitched shriek that was more animal than human, clutching his now useless arm to his chest. His face, which had been a mask of smug cruelty moments before, was now a pale, sweaty canvas of agony and disbelief. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet and collapsing into a heap on the dusty ground, whimpering. For a full 2 seconds, the other three were frozen. Their smirks had vanished, replaced by slack-jawed shock. They were looking at me, then at their whimpering friend, then back at me, their tiny brains struggling to process the equation. Small black woman plus 4 big tough bikers was supposed to equal an easy victim. It was not supposed to equal a snapped radius and a screaming man-child on the ground. Grizz was the first to recover, his shock curdling into a dark, murderous rage. A low growl rumbled in his chest, and his face turned a shade of purple I hadn't thought was humanly possible. "You crazy bitch, you broke his arm!" he charged. It was a pure, unthinking bull rush, all 280 pounds of him aimed directly at me. It's what I expected. Men like Grizz only know one gear: forward. I didn't try to stand my ground. That would be suicide. Instead, I sidestepped at the last possible second, planting my right foot and letting his momentum carry him past me. As he thundered by, I drove the heel of my palm hard into his kidney. It was a solid hit, and I felt the impact jolt up my arm. He grunted, a pained exhalation of beer and fury, and staggered a few steps before catching his balance on one of the bikes. But I didn't have time to admire my work. The other two, let's call them Scab and Beard, were coming at me from opposite sides. They were smarter than Grizz, trying to flank me. Standard pack tactics. I backed up quickly, putting the gas pump between me and Scab. It forced Beard to come at me alone. He was lanky, with a wild-eyed look, and he threw a looping, telegraphed punch aimed at my head. I ducked under it easily, feeling the wind from his knuckles whistle past my ear. As I came up, I drove my elbow directly into his solar plexus. The air exploded out of his lungs in a wet gasp. His eyes bulged, and he folded in on himself like a cheap lawn chair, clutching his stomach and making gagging sounds. One down, temporarily. Scab was coming around the pump now, a nasty-looking crescent wrench in his hand that he must have pulled from his bike. He was more cautious than the others, his eyes narrowed, circling me. He feinted with the wrench, trying to get me to flinch, to create an opening. "Gonna do more than break your arm," he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. I kept my center of gravity low, my hands up, watching his eyes, not the wrench. He lunged, swinging the heavy tool in a wide horizontal arc aimed at my knees. It was a crippling, maiming attack. I didn't retreat. I moved forward. I leaped, planting my left foot on the concrete base of the pump and pushing off, my body twisting in midair. My right leg shot out in a powerful sidekick. My boot connected squarely with the side of his head, right on the temple. The thud of the impact was sickeningly solid. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he dropped the wrench with a clang before collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut. 2 down. Twitchy was still crying on the ground. Beard was still trying to remember how to breathe. It was just me and Grizz. He'd recovered from the kidney shot, and had turned to face me. The rage was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused. He'd seen me take down his two friends in less than 10 seconds. He finally understood I wasn't some random tourist. But he wasn't scared. He was calculating. "You're gonna regret that," he said, his voice low and guttural. He slowly reached inside his leather vest. I braced myself, expecting a knife, maybe even a gun. My own weapon was still in the car. A fatal miscalculation on my part. I should have retrieved it the second I saw them pull in. He grunted with effort as he stumbled back a step, bracing himself against his Harley. The movement pulled his vest taut across his massive back, and for the first time I got a clear look at the large central patch. It wasn't the insignia of a known outlaw motorcycle club. It was a coiled, two-headed serpent, its fangs dripping venom, encircling a broken scale of justice. My blood ran cold. The Serpents of Abel. It wasn't a biker gang. It was a domestic terror group. A violent, well-organized white supremacist militia I'd been hunting for 6 months. They were responsible for a string of armory robberies, arsons, and at least 3 murders across 3 states. We had no names, no faces, just whispers and this symbol. And now their lead enforcer, a man my file code named Goliath, was standing 10 feet away from me at a grimy gas station in the middle of nowhere, his hand finally pulling a long, serrated hunting knife from his vest. He wasn't just a bully, he was my mission, and he had no idea he was staring at the federal agent whose entire job was to dismantle his world. The hunting knife was at least 12 inches long, its serrated edge catching the brutal sunlight. Goliath, or Grizz as he called himself, held it with the familiarity of a surgeon holding a scalpel. This changed everything. This wasn't a brawl anymore. This was an active engagement with a high-value target. My priorities shifted in a nanosecond. 1. Survive. 2. Apprehend. 3. Extract intelligence. "You picked the wrong day, little girl," he growled, advancing slowly. He was no longer a brawler. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who knew how to use the weapon in his hand. He kept the knife low, feinting and jabbing, testing my reactions. I kept backing away, circling toward the front of my Camry. I needed to create distance to get to the equalizer in my purse. My heart was a steady, rhythmic drum in my chest. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was just a problem to be solved, a series of moves and countermoves. He lunged, a surprisingly fast slash aimed at my abdomen. I leaped back, the tip of the blade slicing through the fabric of my t-shirt, missing my skin by a whisper. I felt the air move against my stomach. Too close. He was faster than he looked. I couldn't keep dodging forever. I needed to change the dynamic. As he recovered his balance from the lunge, I kicked out, not at him, but at a discarded oil can lying on the ground. It shot across the gravel and slammed into his shin. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but it was enough to distract him for a fraction of a second. That's all I needed. I spun and sprinted the last few feet to my passenger door. I yanked it open, my hand diving into my purse, past the wallet and the stale granola bar, my fingers closing around the cool, familiar grip of my Glock 26. I turned back just as Goliath was closing the distance, his face a mask of snarling triumph. He thought he had me cornered. His eyes widened when he saw the pistol. The knife, so menacing a moment ago, suddenly looked like a child's toy. "FBI, drop the knife. Now," I commanded. My voice was no longer the traveler's or the fighter's. It was the voice of federal authority, sharp and absolute. A voice that had made hardened criminals drop to their knees. For a moment, he froze, the name of the agency registering in his hate-filled eyes. I saw the flicker of doubt, the panicked calculation. But then it was gone, replaced by a fanatic's resolve. He was never going to surrender. He let out a primal roar and charged, raising the knife for a final, desperate stab. I didn't hesitate. I didn't aim for a limb. He was a lethal threat at close range. 2 shots, center mass, a tight double tap that echoed like thunder in the desert silence. The impact threw him backward as if he'd been hit by a truck. He stumbled, his eyes wide with a final terminal surprise. The knife clattered to the asphalt. He looked down at the 2 dark, spreading stains on his chest, then back at me. There was no hatred in his eyes now, just a hollow emptiness. He collapsed, his massive body hitting the ground with a heavy, final thud. Silence descended again, thick and ringing. Twitchy had stopped whimpering and was staring at his dead leader with terrified eyes. Beard had managed to get to his knees and was now frozen, half-crouched, looking like he was praying. The store clerk, a skinny kid who had been peering through the blinds, now had his hands up where I could see them. I kept my weapon trained on the two conscious bikers. "Don't move. Don't even breathe wrong," I said, my voice steady. I pulled out my phone with my free hand. It took 3 tries to unlock it, my thumb slick with sweat. I dialed the number for the Bureau's regional field office. "This is Special Agent Knight," I said, my eyes never leaving the 2 men. "I have an officer involved shooting. I have engaged and neutralized a primary target from Operation Serpent's Head. Codename Goliath is down. I have 3 other suspects in custody, one requiring immediate medical attention. My location is the Sunspot gas station, Route 95, Nye County. Send backup and a med team, and tell Director Evans I found his snakes." As I spoke, Beard slowly, carefully raised his hands into the air. Twitchy, cradling his broken arm, did the same. The fight was over. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness I'd felt when I first pulled in. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I looked at the scene around me. 4 domestic terrorists, neutralized by 1 woman who just wanted a tank of gas. It was going to be a mountain of paperwork, but as the first distant wail of sirens began to cut through the desert heat, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The vacation could wait. I had a whole nest of snakes to burn out,